I'm finding as these months are going by that I'm starting to understand how Khabib Nurmagomedov's days in the sport of mixed martial arts are truly numbered. 30 fights is certainly a wonderful milestone to cap off an exemplary career at the top of the UFC's most difficult division. Look, as a Khabib fan, I'd obviously prefer it if he stuck around for another 10 fights, but given everything that has happened in the last few years, the personal tragedy in losing his father and coach, as well as his overall explosion in fame, I do not begrudge the Eagle this decision. Because all things considered, this is a true great of the sport that we're watching. We don't know the conclusion of his tale just yet, but even now, with us seemingly heading into the final stretch of his exceptional run through the sport, it appears as though there is just one major unknown as far as his future is concerned. We know that number 29 will be Justin Gaethje if all goes to plan. And though this video will primarily be dealing with the identity of his final opponent, do not take that as an underestimation of Gaethje's prowess or even his chances at beating Khabib. There is no doubt in my mind that the highlight is the most accomplished and dangerous challenge of the champion's career so far. So with that said, yes, we're going to assume that Khabib gets the job done on October 24th. Do I personally believe that he will get past Justin Gaethje? You never do know, but I think that Nurmagomedov is a horrible stylistic matchup for every 155-pound fighter on the roster. Style for style, Gaethje might be better off on paper than the likes of Dustin Poirier or even Conor McGregor, but I think when it comes down to it, I don't know if the former World Series of Fighting champion holds the answer to Khabib's style. I have of course been wrong on countless occasions in the past, but even still, that's not what this video is about. So with that out of the way, let's look at Khabib. 28 fights. It's a very pretty number, and in terms of the performances and the heights that he has reached, Khabib deserves to be counted among the most impressive mixed martial artists of all time. Now with that being said, it's important not to get too crazy about the whole 30 fights thing. Like I said before, it's a great milestone and a fantastic number that is worthy of one of the greatest fighters of all time, a title that I believe the Eagle to be deserving of. But let's not pretend that the first 16 fights of Khabib's career didn't contain within them some very dodgy matchmaking. Again, this is not an attack on Khabib or his fans. I count myself as a Khabib fan. But when as a 14-0 athlete you take on a pro debutant, there's something a bit fishy. In fact, 6 of his 16 opponents before making his UFC debut were actually fighting their first professional bout against Khabib. On top of that, Khabib only actually fought 6 fighters with winning records in his first 16 fights, meaning everyone else either had an equal record, like a 5 wins, 5 losses, or had lost more fights than they had won. And look, I'm not hating, I'm just bringing facts to the table in order to paint you a more vivid picture of Khabib's career as a whole. If Nurmagomedov had made his own professional debut 12 fights ago when he fought Kamal Shalarus in his first UFC outing, and had a pro record right now of 12-0 instead of 28-0, I would not think of him as any less of an elite talent. I know what I'm seeing in there. I don't need a padded record to tell me that Khabib is an undeniably great fighter. But I'll point it out because it annoys me that a lot of people choose to ignore that fact. It's not always about the numbers or the title defenses or the amount of notches you have on your record. I like to look at the heights a fighter reached at their best, the moments they sunk to at their worst, and the consistency at which they were able to perform. Personally, I would take Jon Jones's 26-1 record over Khabib's due to the decade that he spent at the top and the highs that make that record what it is. Does that mean I think that Jon Jones is a better fighter? I don't think it does. What Khabib has done hasn't really been done before. That level of dominance stands as a high point that no one else has reached in my eyes. Khabib's numbers are insanely impressive, and his fighting style is one that is built around completely nullifying any offensive threats his opponents might spring up, while also opening up routes for him to begin smashing, so to speak. I love watching Nurmagomedov do his thing. Never for 1 second of his career have I been bored watching this master at work. And that brings me to the overall point of this video, I suppose. If there is only one more fight for Khabib after the Justin Gaethje bout, the identity of that opponent will say a lot about Khabib's goals. I think the fact that he is content to retire on 30 wins is interesting for sure. I do not think that his work is done just yet if establishing a claim at GOAT status is his overall goal. But it might not be. It doesn't have to be. Personally, I believe his options are limited to the following fighters, and this includes rematches, super fights, anything that I would classify as realistic. George St. Pierre, Tony Ferguson, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, and the welterweight champion of the world, whoever that may be when the time comes. Those 5 opponents are the only names that make sense. Sure, he has already dominated 2 of them in Poirier and McGregor, but I wouldn't write either man off as they look to find their way back into title contention. Khabib doesn't fight that often, so we may be looking at mid to late 2021 for his retirement fight. There has been a lot of buzz about the possibility of a clash with an out-of-practice, near 40-year-old Georges St-Pierre, but look, while I wouldn't hold it against Khabib if he sought that fight out, I just don't think it helps his legacy like a matchup against any of the other names I've listed. That's not intended as a dig at George per se, but let's be real here, he has fought once in 8 years. I'd be excited as a fan for the spectacle, but I'd strike his name off the list based on the many asterisks that come with a fight like that, as well as the fact that GSP himself seems to be edging away from it as time goes on. The welterweight title is another thing, but it doesn't seem as though Nurmagomedov has too much interest in it. And why should he? He's the best lightweight of all time, and that, admirably, seems to be good enough for him. Both Dustin Poirier and in particular Conor McGregor do offer a certain level of intrigue, provided that they secure a win in their next outing. For me, everything can change in one fight. All of a sudden, a fighter who seemed down and out can go from a place of real uncertainty to the very top of the pecking order. If Tony Ferguson can regain his momentum to such an extent that it makes him the undeniable top contender, that it makes booking the most cursed fight in MMA history a viable pick once again, that is all that I want for Khabib. That is all that I want for the sport. In my eyes, it would be a tragedy to lose that fight. And look, I believe that if Conor McGregor can regather himself and show up in a better mental and physical state than he did at UFC 229, then that could also be an option. But I just think there's something magical about Khabib and Ferguson. The cancellations, the questions, the global pandemic that served as the final nail in the coffin. Sure, let's not forget that Justin Gaethje is the top contender to Khabib's throne, without question. But if we're looking at a clean 30 fights here, what better way for the Eagle to make his final walk than if Tony Ferguson was the one who had clawed his way back into his path? That's pure theatre, folks. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. And as always, thank you for watching.